One Punch Man is a scary good show. I'm sure it's no surprise to you. I've seen a few animes, and aside from only one, none have been as good as One Punch. Now, of course, I'm referring to Season 1. Season 2 for me at least felt it would be dead on arrival. I'll get into that later, but let's talk about why Season 2 could be better. But let's be nice and be positive first. Even though I'm not a huge fan of having a central villain, this is more of a show where Monster of the Week would really work out the most. I really do enjoy Garo. His motive makes sense, and even though the setup is generic with the whole young karate student betrays his master who's also his father figure and goes rogue, he's still intimidating in his own way. I like the stuff with the Blizzard Lady. It's interesting to show more corruption with the hero society. Now some heroes might not want to rank up because of like power disputes, and like that sense is really neat. The intro is okay, and honestly that's it, which is a shame because I love Season 1 so much, as I said earlier. But why do I like Season 1 so much? One Punch Man is probably one of the more unique shonens out there. What I mean by that is it subverts and plays off common anime tropes, but it still feeds into them when it's necessary or when it's good for structure. This showcases itself in a lot of the writing, powers, and even the character designs. A great example is, Saitama himself. A lot of anime characters have big hair, big eyes, super muscular, and if you look at Saitama, you get none of that. He's this bald, goofy-looking dude. Even the power and the setup of a hero that can one-punch anything kind of changes the whole direction of the show, because typically a hero is trying to move toward that strength, but he's already gotten to that point. Ability to beat the bad guy, but in this, Saitama just beats him in one punch. That's, it's a struggle, and it's just funny as well, because it plays off what you would expect. Also, his backstory isn't dramatic or really epic. He did a bunch of push-ups and sit-ups, ran 5 miles like every day, so it's kind of different than the, I lifted 100 pounds and I had to defeat and I used the strength of my heart. I mean, to be fair, this is a world where if you like lobster too much, you can turn into a lobster. So it really isn't that far-fetched that just doing basic exercises would make you do that. You get other characters in the show, and they also have super generic designs. You got the Kung Fu Master I mentioned earlier, so he's an old dude, buff, greaser-looking dude. Got the fat guy, which I don't like it. It makes me uncomfortable. To be fair, most of these characters are an open book looking at them. Yes, some of them do subvert things in a somewhat interesting way, but this is a good thing for Season 1 because Season 1 kind of plays off those common tropes, and the other characters really don't matter unless building up to something that's actually important. But in Season 2, they try to make you care about the characters. And while that might work for some people, it didn't work for me because these are the most boring and generic characters possible. And they're also just kind of useless in Season 1 as well. I mean, they really don't do much of anything. The only real one that did anything would be like the tornado person. They're only in it for like 2 seconds, so they're not that important. I mean, in Season 1, 4 guys had to take on only one of the enemies in the alien ship, while Saitama was just running through, blowing stuff up without even trying. Now, don't get me wrong, I would be willing to have these characters have some development or change, do like anything really, but they don't, I don't even really blame the writers. It's not like there's anything to really work with these characters. Now, story in Season 1 is simple. Saitama is bored with life, and he is too strong. It opens ambitiously with Saitama taking on a huge monster in the first 3 minutes. He then defeats a titan, while later taking out smaller enemies. As the episode continues, we get bigger threats that do even more damage. We get meteors, Atlantis attacking, and then we get to Alien, who are so strong they even get like a whole episode building up to them by the generic fortune teller old lady. They're so strong that when they literally just land their spaceship, they destroy a whole city. They are unstoppable, according to literally everyone. And like I mentioned earlier, just one of the goons has 4 of the top heroes struggling to fight. Saitama's going through his spaceship, just blowing stuff up, probably thinking it's a normal day. Or what can be considered normal for him at least. But then we meet Boros. He has a similar backstory to Saitama. He's become so strong that he is bored. But unlike Saitama, he uses power for evil, destroying planets hoping for the thrill of a fight for one chosen one. Saitama punches him, breaking his armor. Saitama is shocked at the fact that he did not die in one punch. Saitama plays it cool and the fight continues. When Boros starts threatening Earth, that's when Saitama gets here and uses his final move to defeat Boros. Boros realizes that Saitama was using his full power. Saitama doesn't mock and lets Boros fight peacefully. The thing is, Saitama realizes he doesn't need to defeat in one punch. He was a hero for fun, but he became a professional hero. He becomes the strongest hero. Now, Season 2's story is, one of Silverfang's previous students went rogue. I couldn't think of a generic and simple, done-to-death story. Now, like I said earlier, I do like Gar. I think his motivation is unique and it's understandable. We also get the Monster Association headquarters, which is a more generic name than the League of Villains. That thing is used These names would be fine if it was still a parody, but the problem with season 2 is that One Punch Man is no longer a parody of shonens, it's just a shonen. And not a really good one at that. This arc in season 1 would have been a 2-part story, if that. Saitama also repeats his arc from the first season. He is too powerful and bored. This time around he decides to learn a new skill and impersonate one of Silver Fang's students who is too injured to fight. Now this is kind of interesting. A lot of animes also have tournament arcs, and this could have been really cool to play on some of those tropes. And hey, maybe even they could have played into it where Saitama could have had more character, but we don't get that at all. It's just Saitama wearing a wig in one, and again it's like, oh, he's One Punch Man, what do you expect? Meanwhile, during this we get the Monster Association attacking the cities, and honestly it's kind of frustrating because so obviously this is Saitama, so he couldn't kill the monsters. They had to push him aside for a few episodes. I mean, when you have a character that can destroy anything, is basically a god, you have to right away from it be out of conflict, but it's so artificial, it's just, you can't even take it seriously. After the tournament arc, Saitama fights some of the monsters off, or even some of the mutated Kung Fu guys, and then he kills the giant centipede, which everyone's like, ooh, it's so strong. It's not that strong, it's not even that cool, it looks stupid. Monsters retreat, showing a much more menacing villain for the future. Then it ends on a cliffhanger for season 3. I'm not a huge fan of cliffhangers, especially when you can see where the plot is going to go from here, but the ending is larger than satisfying in and of its own. I don't find them threatening. Yeah, they look threatening, they don't do anything really that threatening. Yeah, they attack the cities, but the other superheroes can take them, and they don't seem to be struggling all that much. In season 1, the other superheroes kind of suck, as I mentioned earlier. And it's up to Saitama to pick up the slack. The thing is, in season 1, I mean, okay, this was season 1's endgame. The city was destroyed, intergalactic battle. This is just some monsters. It's hard not to feel the same stakes, because the stakes have already been raised so high, but the bar just went completely down. Of course, the story would be nothing without the comedy, and they definitely have that. Now I'm going to make the bold claim that comedy is not subjective. Your sense of humor, because comedy is the art of telling a joke. Whether you laugh at the joke is irrelevant. If you find a fart joke or someone falling down funny, that's okay. It's your taste. When you hear comedians talk about their craft of making a joke, there is a certain structure to it. Gauging the audience, setting up the punchline, adding layers to the joke, and all of this can be summed up in episode 3 of season 1, The Obsessive Scientist. It starts off with a flashback to the origin for the House of Evolution. It's a really interesting setup, actually. You get drawn into it, and suddenly Saitama gets bored and tells them to hurry up, which is reincorporation of a joke in episode 2. They go to the House of DNA because they can't do it tomorrow since there's a sale at the grocery store tomorrow. After that, we see the villains of the House of DNA. They are planning traps on all 8 floors to hold off the heroes, Genos and Saitama. Once Genos and Saitama get there, instead of a 2-episode season arc of surviving the trap, carefully moving stuff, Genos just blows it up because he said it's easier this way. And it is. That's why it's funny. Dr. Genos decides he has to use the ultimate weapon, Carnage Kabuto. He is the peak of evolution and is better than any human being. Saitama and Genos go to the basement. Genos gets beaten up really easily, and Saitama gets challenged by Carnage Kabuto. Saitama then reveals how he got his power. No one believes him and thinks he is full of crap. Now the stakes get raised real high, because Carnage Kabuto is going to go on a rampage until next week Saturday. Saitama has an internal monologue on how he made the mistake. This is all happening with great animation, great music, everything, just at the same time. A lot of anime would use this opportunity to show a flashback and be dramatic about how the character has grown so much since this fight, and this fight is so important to them. But instead, Saitama comes to the realization that he missed the sale at the grocery store because it's Saturday instead of... He one punches Kabuto and screams in pure anguish because he missed the sale at the store. Now, let's look at season 2, which actually makes a similar joke, and explain why it fails at being funny. In season 2, episode 10, where a bunch of monsters are going to the Monster Association headquarters because that's where all the bad guys are, Saitama does this.
今日も怪人多いな。こいつらもしかして俺に会いに来てんのか？それよりもゴミ収集車が来る時間だ!
There is no build-up, bad animation, and no context. It's just a scene that happens and they move on. It might look like the same joke on paper, but one is trying really harder than the other, while the other just kind of exists. Something a huge thing to talk about that plays into a lot of the problems with comedy is that the animation is really bad. In the final fight, it isn't that bad like the last few episodes, but rewatching season 1 and 2, the difference is very apparent. It's like watching a Pixar movie and then watching Ratatouille. A lot of the time, I laughed at the details in the animation for season 1. That's why it's funny to me. Plus, the animation made you feel the weight of Saitama's punches with the bits of the monster just falling off, and the shockwaves, and just the general feel. Now, we don't know the budget, but considering the animation studio changed to Toei Animation, which is infamous for really bad animation, I'm assuming they changed their priorities. Plus, the budget for season 1 is actually surprisingly only $2 million, which I know sounds like a lot, but is seriously low for a TV show, much less an animated show. So either their budget got restricted, or it was Toei and they were lazy. One Punch Man also showed the story on what a superhero can truly be. Now, superheroes are seen as great, strong beings that needs to make sacrifices for the greater good. Spider-Man's a great example of this. He has to balance home life and superhero life. And it doesn't always work out, and that's the conflict. That's why we are drawn to his character. Now, with Saitama, since he is so strong, it's fair to say that anything fighting him doesn't really stand a chance. So Saitama can't really sacrifice his life if need be, but he can sacrifice something else. In episode 4, Saitama wants to be a hero and he wants a fan club like Genos. We also meet Moomin Rider in this episode, who, when confronting the bad guys, he gets beat up instantly. Now, this is played for laughs, but this is important later, so we'll get back to that. Later in episode 7, the tank top guys are mean to Saitama because he caused the destruction of the city, but if Saitama didn't do what was necessary, it would have destroyed the city and everyone would have died. They try to ruin his image and defeat him. Saitama doesn't care and is happy that the people are just sick. Now, all of this comes together in episode 9, Unrelenting Justice. Deep Sea King has been beating heroes left and right, even beating Genos. He's about to attack the citizen. Then Moomin Rider comes to fight the Deep Sea King, and this is all built up during episode 8 as well. Everyone still thinks they're screwed because Moomin Rider is only Class C, and Deep Sea King has taken out 2 S-Class heroes now. Moomin Rider gets beat up a little. He starts talking about how even though he can't win, and that's not what's important. The important thing is taking him on right now. A kid from the audience starts cheering Moomin Rider on. The music starts to swell up, and the rest of the crowd just starts cheering him on. Moomin Rider lets out a scream and goes into fight, and Saitama comes in and takes a direct blow from his Deep Sea King. The crowd is confused but cautious. Saitama kills the Deep Sea King. The crowd cheers and everything should be great. But then the Redditor over here decides to trash talk Saitama. He talks about how the organization is obviously broken or something was wrong with the monster, because the monster was defeated by a Class C hero that obviously wasn't that strong, and the other heroes just suck. Because the tank top guys, the public thinks Saitama is a cheater. Now during this we get a flashback to Genos and Saitama looking through the mail. Genos gets a bunch of letters praising him, even fan clubs, and this was also shown before with other characters going up to him in the bar, and even Amaya Mask, who's notorious for gatekeeping S-Class superhero. He's praising Genos. Where Saitama just gets one letter and it's shit-talking. Saitama realizes that even though he wants the public to adore him, he sacrifices that to save the organization from doubt, because he knows that is more important than any success, any fame he can have. He proclaims that the monster is weakened and he is going to continue to steal credit from the other heroes. Everyone hates him, but Saitama sacrificed what he wanted for something that's more important. So even though Saitama can't sacrifice himself, he sacrificed what he wanted. Scenes like what I just talked about make me so sad about what season 2 is like. Honestly, nothing even comes close to what I just described. Saitama still has some nice hero bits, where he actually inspires a guy to become a hero, which is actually really interesting, and I did like that a lot. I did not see that coming. Now, personally, I never took this story super seriously. It's kind of like Shaun of the Dead. It's a comedy you aren't supposed to take seriously, but when you do, it hits pretty hard. The problem is season 2 isn't even average. It's just bad. Yeah, it has small bits of interesting plot points, but doesn't go anywhere. Also, yeah, while plot holes are in everything, the plot holes here are just really annoying and way too obvious. Also, most plot threads from the first season aren't even brought up again. How did King get S rank? He doesn't excel intellectually or physically. Maybe his power is just the power of luck and he doesn't realize it. Why is Gorilla Grodd in it for 2 seconds and they never bring it up again? Mel Knight has no stake in the plot or any build-up. Last season they brought up, oh, hey Genos, this guy's a real threat, you should worry about him. I thought it would build up to Genos being like, Metal Knight, you did create the cyborg that killed my family. Also, speaking of that, why didn't they bring up Genos' backstory? Literally nothing is developed on that. How come the Monster Association headquarters doesn't know about Saitama? Actually, how come nobody mentions Saitama? I mean, I know the public thinks of him as a cheater, but the Hero Association, you'd be like, no, this dude's actually super good. We should keep tabs on him, or something. I'm not saying there wasn't potential in this series, but what we got wasn't what I wanted. And you know, if you found this really good, I'm actually really happy for you. I wish I could have enjoyed this. Season 3 may or may not happen, and honestly, I don't really care either way, because they're probably going to screw it up. Even though I don't like Season 2, I think I've made that clear. I can still enjoy Season 1, and they can't take that away from me.